Thank you for coming back to your seats. Please have a seat and make yourself comfortable, and don't forget to switch your phone into silent mode. After having a lunch, now we continue to the next session. The third session is about hash function, an introduction to cryptographic hash functions, which will be presented by Dr. Jian Guo from Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. Let's give him applause.
Thanks for the introduction. So this afternoon I will give two talks. The first one is about an introduction to cryptographic hash function. And the second talk will be a bit more on research itself. So the recent standards of cryptographic hash function by National Institute of Standards and Technology of US is called SHA-3, the third generation of secure hash algorithm. So in the next talk, I will give some detailed cryptographic attacks against the SHA-3 and to see where the security margin is. But for the first one, it will be a general introduction. So it doesn't require much background. So I will start from zero. So I will give first an introduction, followed by some introduction to the current hash functions and their security, followed by design strategies and domain extenders of hash functions, then an introduction to the SHA-3 competition and what we do after SHA-3. So what is hash? So in English words, it's a typical order of corns, beef hash, hashes with potatoes, carrots, or grosto. So that's a hash. So basically a mix of everything. But cryptographic hash functions are a function which maps a string of arbitrary length to a fixed length string. Yeah? So it should support strings starting from length 0 to infinitely long messages. But in practice, we actually support messages with limited length, like up to 2 to the 64 or 2 to the 128 bits. So that's sufficient. The key is to output a fixed length digest. So typically, depending on the security requirements, it will be 256 or 512 bits. It has many functionalities, like digital signature. For digital signature, what we do is we hash a message and sign the digest instead of the message itself, because for most of the signature protocols, it accepts the input of fixed length. So if you give the protocol an arbitrary length document, it won't work. So to solve the problem, what we usually do is, instead of signing the message itself, we do a hash first. And then, since the hash that digest is of fixed length, so this hash digest can be used for signature protocols. And for data integrity and checksum, so if you download very big data from websites like the installation file for Microsoft Office or Microsoft Windows systems, since the file itself is usually big, and to check whether your downloaded file is complete and correct or not, what we can do is we can compute the hash digest, check it, compute the hash digest of your downloaded file, check it against the one provided by the file provider. If it's consistent, then very likely your file downloaded is complete and correct. Yeah. So that's the meaning of data integrity and checksum. We can also do message authentication codes with keys. For example, HMAC and MMAC. So what we do is we actually hash a key together with a message. So it has both functionality of integrity and authenticity, meaning that the communicating two parties compute this on both sides. So the sender sends the message together with this MAC to the receiver. On receiving the message and the MAC, the receiver computes its own MAC, check against the one sent by the sender. So if it's consistent, there are two things you can be sure. First, the message is correct and uncorrupted. Second, the message is sent by the people who has possession to the key. Yeah? Anyone else without the key will not be able to reproduce the same MAC. Okay? So if you try a different key, the MAC will be different. Yeah? So if the MAC is the same as what you received, then you can be sure this message is correct. It's from the sender who has the key. And we can also do pseudo-random number generator. If you want lots of pseudo-random numbers, you can do key and nonce and some index. You can also do key derivation, password storage. So in many operating systems, this is used for password testing. So instead of storing your password on the computer, what is stored on the computer is the hash digest of your password, together with a random number, what we call sort. So whenever you type a password on the computer, what the computer do is find out the sort, together with the password, compute the digest, check against the pre-stored digest previously. If it's consistent, then you key in a correct password. Otherwise, it is not. So why don't we store password itself on the computer? So the problem is, if it's a server and lots of people have their password stored on the computer, on the disk as a plain text, then if the file is revealed to someone else, all the passwords are revealed. So using this method, we can protect against this incidents. So meaning even you get the digest, hash digest, you will not be able to recover the password because this is one of the properties hash functions needs to guarantee. It is called one way, meaning knowing the outputs, you should not able to recover the inputs. We can also do forensics like proof of non modification with some key and evidence. So this is usually used by courts and police. Okay. So if you want to prove to someone that you have something or do not have something, and yet you don't want to reveal the document as a plain text to anyone else, what you do. Say, for example, I have a property, so I got a document, the property document with my name on it. From 2000 onwards, I have this property. But you don't want everybody know this. Yet, when there's this dispute, you want to show people that you really have it. So what you do? So you can actually do this together with a key and evidence, the property documents, you do a hash function, publish the digest to the public. Okay, publish to the public. At the moment you have the documents from 2000s. Okay, so you publish it, and if anyone have, so of course you publish the digest first. So the evidence itself is still secret. There's nobody else knows it. So of course, when someone has some doubts about this claim, what you can do is you show the evidence to the courts. Okay, you show the evidence to the courts, and the courts will do the same. Okay, using the key and the evidence, compute the hash. If this hash is consistent with what you have published years back, then it is convincing that this evidence is not modified. Yeah? Because if it's modified, the hash digest will be changed for sure. So in this way, you can actually show to the courts or any third party that you have this evidence long before. Okay, at the moment you publish the digest, you should have this evidence. And when you produce the digest for the same, produce the digest again, it is convincing that the evidence was never modified. Okay, was never modified. So there are many functions about hash functions. So to support all those applications, there are many security properties the hash function needs to fulfill. So the basic three requirements are called collision resistance, preimage resistance, and second preimage resistance. So for collision resistance, it is defined to be, it should be computationally difficult to find x and x prime, such that x is not equal to x prime, and yet the digest or the outputs are the same. Yeah? Depending on the digest size, usually we denote it as n bits. The security level is 2 to the n divided by 2. Okay? So this is due to birthday attack. So what do we call birthday? If you want to find two different messages such that the digest is the same, what you do is you keep a pool of the digest. Okay? Find a random message, compute the digest. Find another message, compute the digest. Find a third message, compute the digest. You keep doing so until there's a collision among the digests. Okay? So how many messages will you need to find just one collision? This is called birthday problem. Okay? Okay, maybe I should demonstrate a little bit how this is computed. So let's say you have a space. Okay. You have a space of n bits, which means inside the space you have 2 to the n possibilities. So 2 to the n possibilities. So you randomly pick a number there, pick another number there, and pick another number there. You keep doing this until you find yourself picking a repeated number. So what is the number or expected numbers of numbers you should pick until you encounter such a repetition? Yeah? So how do you actually calculate it? So let's say you pick L numbers, x1, x2, x3, up to XL. How many pairs can you form? So you can actually form L times L minus 1 divided by 2 pairs. Yeah? You can form so many pairs. For any pair, if it's random, what is the probability for it to be collision? You have this big space. And for it to collide, the probability is exactly 2 to the negative n. Yeah, one of the total number of the space. Yeah, so that's your chance for a random pair to be collision. Yeah, if this is roughly half, let's say, you get a half probability for it to be collision. So the L is roughly square roots of 2 to the n, which is 2 to the n divided by 2. So that's the number of x you need for it to form a collision. Yeah? So this is called birthday effect. So you can actually the problem comes from the birthday problem itself. So like in how many people do you expect so that 2 of them share the same birthday? Yeah, it's the same problem. You actually expect roughly a square root of 395 people, so that there's 2 people share the same birthday. Yeah? Because there are 365 different days in a year. Yeah? The same problem. Okay. So this is the security strength of the collision resistance. And for Preimage, you just assume what you do is brute force search. Okay. So for Preimage, it refers to the property that given a digest, it's difficult to find X, so that the digest is given. So for second Preimage, you are given a message. It's difficult to find another message, so that the digests are the same. Okay. So for Preimage resistance, if the hash function is one way, meaning you are not able to compute the inputs from the outputs, then the complexity is supposed to 2 to the n. Because what you can do is randomly pick a message, compute the digest, check against the one you've given. If it's not equal, you pick another message, compute the digest, check against the digest. Yeah? So you repeat the process. So how many times do you expect yourself repeating this process before you get a correct hit? So 2 to the n. Yeah? Because every time you pick a random message, the output is random. Yeah? The chance for you to hit the given one is 2 to the negative n. So you expect yourself repeating 2 to the n times. For second Preimage, actually you expect a little bit less. We will see later. Okay, and there are many more other properties like pseudo-randomness, unpredictability, and indifferentiability, and as well as software hardware efficiencies requirements for hash functions. So pseudo-randomness means if you fix some part of the message, for example, the key, and the output should look like a random oracle with respect to this message. Yeah? Unpredictability means that you should not able to predict the digest depending on the property of X. So you should not be able to explore any correlation between the digest and the inputs X. Indifferentiability it's difficult for you to find related sets of input-output values. And of course, for a hash function to be useful, usually we require to be very fast in both software and hardware. Okay. So actually, we are requiring too many things from hash function. So just like this animal, you want it to be a pig producing meat. You want it to look like a beef cow producing milk, and you want to produce fur and egg as well. So too many things expected from a hash function. So if you expect too many things, then we have to take too many things into account during the design phase, and then the problem is it's easy to make mistakes. Then, yeah, some of them will not be fulfilled, and then that's what we call broken. Okay. So before the SHA-3 competition, this is the status of the standards. So for standards of the Nist, so National Institute of Standards and Technology of the United States, it is called MD series and SHA series. Okay, from MD2 to MD4, MD5, and SHA-0, SHA-1, SHA-2. And before the SHA-3 competition, this is the status. Everything are broken except the SHA-3, SHA-2. And for many other standards, so Ghost is Russian standards. Tiger is designed by two famous Israel cryptographer. RIPE-MD was also designed by a famous team. And HAS 160 is Korean government standards. So mostly are broken, okay, except the SHA-2 and HAS 160. So the status for hash function was really bad before the SHA-3 competition. And the thing is, it really takes a long time to do the migration, yeah? Because it costs lots of money. So although we've talked about, okay, SHA-3 competition was from 2008 to 2012. So that was already 10 years ago. And still, nowadays, as of today, there are still lots of places making use of SHA-1. You know, SHA-1 was broken in 2005. 14 years later, people were still using SHA-1. Yeah? So you can see the migration really takes a long time and lots of efforts. So for example, before the SHA-3, there was a survey calculating the places where MD5 was used in roughly 850 places in 2009. And it has really great difficulty to move to SHA-1 and SHA-2 because MD5 has digest size 160. SHA-2 has digest size at least 224. So there's incompatibility problem. It's difficult to move from MD5 SHA-1 to SHA-2. MD5 SHA-1 were the most popular used hash functions before the SHA-3 competition. And actually by the time of SHA-3 competition, people were supposed to move to SHA-2, okay? And there was a concern that so you can see the SHA family are really weak and broken. And we are supposed to move to SHA-2. The thing is, the design principle of SHA-2 follows the same design principles of SHA-0 and SHA-1. So there was a concern that there might be some problem in SHA-2 as well. It's just that we didn't find it, but there's such a risk. So the idea is to have a backup solution, okay? Have a backup solution. with a design principle totally different from SHA-2, okay? So in case there's some problem happens to SHA-2, we still have a backup solution, SHA-3. So that's why we need SHA-3. So if you need a new hash function, the first thing is where do we start? Okay, so we start with compression function and domain extension. Okay, so as I shown just now, as a definition of hash function, it should accept the arbitrary length string. Yeah, but in our digital world, functions are usually defined with fixed input length, and that's easier to analyze as well in the security, in several security models. Yeah, so that's why we need a what we call compression function, which maps the fixed length inputs to a fixed length output, and then on top of it, we need a domain extension, so that we can handle arbitrary length input input string. Yeah. So one of the popular design strategy is what we call Markov-Damgard strategy, strengthening. Okay. So basically, given a message, what we do is chop it into fixed length blocks, and if the final block is not sufficient for a full block, what we do is to do padding. So we add several more messages, bits, so that the last block becomes a complete block. So after that, we should come up with a compression function f, so that it accepts the fixed length inputs and produce fixed length outputs. Start with an initial value, use the first message block as additional input to the compression function, and this compression function will produce updated value here, and this value is used as the input of the next compression function. And message block 2 will use as the additional inputs, and this process goes on until all the message blocks are processed. So before producing the hash digest, it goes through a finalization process. So this is how SHA family and MD family was designed. So all of them follow this strategy. But this construction suffers from many problems. So the first one is length extension. So length extension means given a message, you are able to produce another message so that the second message is actually following all the previous block of the first message. Meaning that you can see if I have a message block repeating the first message but with some more message blocks. So all the previous computation will be exactly the same. Yeah? If I get a message, second message, which follow the first message plus some additional message blocks, yeah? The computation of all this will be the same, followed by the additional blocks. Yeah? So this is called the length extension. This is a terrible problem for some message authentication codes applications. Let me just show how this works. Maybe I have the slides. If not, I will show you. Oh, okay, I have the slides. So that's message length extension. If I have h of m, I can come up with another message which is padded m concatenated with m prime, which means additional message. Since the computation of the hash digest of the padded m is exactly the same, I can reuse the output processing up to this point, and then continue the computation with the M prime. Yeah. So this is a horrible problem for message authentication codes like this. So if you have a message authentication code like this, which means the digest of key concatenated with message is the MAC, then without knowing the key, I can produce another valid MAC. So how do I do that? So without knowing the key, I can produce another message. If this MAC is the hash digest of key followed by message, yeah, what I can do is I know the MAC of H, K, pet M followed by prime. If this is, let's say, A, this is B, I will know B equals to the hash of A followed by M prime. Because the hash of this part is exactly A. So without knowing the K, I can produce another message, which is the padded M concatenated with M prime, so that this digest can be produced without knowing the K. Yeah? So this is called length extension. Length extension, meaning, so the message authentication code is supposed to do both integrity and authenticity. Yeah? Authenticity means that without knowing the key, you should not be able to produce the MAC. However, in this case, without knowing the key, I know after processing this key and padded M, it is A. Yeah? So I don't need to know the K. I will be able to know the A. Yeah? Concatenate with the M prime, I will be able to produce the hash digest B. Yeah? So this is called length extension attack. Yeah? Without knowing the key, you are able to produce another message together with the message authentication code corresponding with it. So this is the first problem called length extension. And the second problem is called multi-collision. So multi-collision, recall previously, so no matter which way you go, it will always lead you from H0 to HT. So that's what we call multi-collision. Yeah? 2 to the L different messages leading you from H0 to HT. Yeah? So that's multi-collision. However, the total cost of this collision is simply T multiplied with the cost of finding one collision. Yeah? You find one collision here, one collision here, one collision here. So you repeated this process T times. So at the cost of T times the computation required for a single collision, you found 2 to the T collisions. Yeah? So that's multi-collision. And so you also have the problem of fixed points. So some of the hash functions, compression function, are constructed from block ciphers. So if you construct a have compression function in this way. So message is used as the key of the block cipher. H is used as the inputs of the block cipher. Then you have the problem of the fixed points. Yeah? If you do H equals to the decryption under the key M of the message 0, then you found a fixed point. Why? Because H is the plain text of the ciphertext 0. Yeah? So means if you input H here, the ciphertext will be 0. So this thing will be 0. 0 plus H is H itself. Yeah? So with H as the input and H as the output as well. So the H doesn't update. Yeah? So that is what we call fixed point. Meaning inputs and output are the same. Yeah? Because such thing can always be found. You just decrypt the ciphertext 0 under the key M, find the plain text H, and this H is a fixed point. Yeah? So what's the problem with the fixed point? Yeah? Imagine in a hash function, no matter how many times you process the message, the chaining value doesn't update. Yeah? Doesn't update. Meaning, with or without that message block, the output is the same. That's a serious problem because just imagine in some documents you can just remove one block and the digest is the same. Yeah? And so we also have this problem called second preimage attack. So given a message of more than 2 to k blocks, we can find the second preimage in 2 to the n minus k versus the expected 2 to the n. Yeah? So how do we do that? So given the message and the chaining value hi, the chance for a random chaining value colliding with one of the h is 2 to the k minus n instead of 2 to the minus n. So do I have a figure? No. Okay. Okay. Let me just. So the second preimage means given a message, you get a digest. What is the computation efforts needed to find another message so that the digest is the same? Yeah? So ideally, if the digest is of n bits, then the chance for you to hit the same digest is 2 to the negative n. Yeah? So you need to repeat the process 2 to the n times. However, for the Markov-Damgard construction, since it follows this design, IV compression function F, first block, compression function F, second block, compression function F, set block, and we have 2 to the k blocks. And we want to find another message so that the digest is the same. Yeah? So what you can do is you start with the IV, try a message M1 prime, try random ones. And the output here can hit here, 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 or here. Yeah? So you have 2 to the k intermediate chaining values. If this value hits one of them, we are done. Why? Because let's say you know this value hits here, means they collide with this value. It collides with this value. Then I find a path leading to the digest from M1 prime, M3, M4 up to this message. Then you get the same digest. Yeah. So these hitting places can be either here or here or here or anywhere among all the 2 to the k values. Yeah? So the chance for you to hit one of them is increased from 2 to the negative n to 2 to the k minus n. Yeah? So the chance is increased by a factor of 2 to the k. So that's the problem of the second preimage. This value can hit any of them. Yeah. So if this one hits here, same value as this one, then we can go for M1 prime, M2, M3, up to M2 to the K. Yeah? Yeah? As long as you hit one of them, you follow all the rest message blocks to the digest. Yeah? So that's the problem of the second preimage attack. So instead of 2 to the n expected security level, you only get 2 to the n minus k for the Markov-Damgard construction. So that's one of the 4 issues of the Markov-Damgard. So noticing this issue, there was a solution to this called HIFA, Hash Iterative Framework, proposed in 2007 by Ali Beham and Odd Dunkelman. So instead of having 2 inputs, it has 4 inputs. So one is the block index, S is the sort. So block index keep records of the position of the message. So when it is the first block, T is 1. When it's second block, T is 2, etc. And the sort is to produce, to take another randomness as the input of the compression function. And it's proven to be indifferentiable from a random oracle, resistance to length extension, fixed point, generic second preimage attack, but not multi-collision. And there's another design strategy different from the traditional Markov-Damgard and HIFA called sponge. And it's very simple and elegant. Proposed in 2007. Here the F is a permutation, meaning map m bits input to m bits output, and it's invertible. Okay, invertible means this F function is 1-to-1 bijective function, and you can compute either the forward direction or the backward direction. So with this permutation, what you can do is, given a message block, you chop into fixed length blocks and do padding if the final block is not full block. And what you do is start with all zero states, XOR the value to the first few bits of the states, input to the permutation, XOR the value, input the permutation, XOR the value, input into permutation, until all the message blocks are processed. And then using the first R bit value as the digest, if it's not sufficient, then you repeat the process until you get sufficient many bits digest. Okay, this is called sponge. Actually, for this construction, Keccak is using this construction, and Keccak is the winner of the SHA-3. So current SHA-3 design follows this design strategy. This is okay, a bit more about the SHA-3 competition. So it's supposed the SHA-3 hash function is supposed to support digest size of 224, 256, 384, and 512 bits. It should be able to hash up to 2 to the 64 bits message. So 2 to the 64 is huge, okay? 2 to the 30 is gigabits. 2 to the 40, that's terabits. 2 to the 50, that's petabits. Yeah. So that's huge. It should be able to support HMAC, randomized hashing PRF, and resistant to the length extension. Should support one pass mode, means it processes the message block once. And Nist expects SHA-3 to have a security strength that is at least as good as SHA-2, with significantly improved the efficiency, meaning that you should perform much better than SHA-2 in both software and hardware. And this is the schedule. In 2007 November, Nist issued the call for submission. 2008 was October 31st was the submission deadline. 64 submission received, and 51 was selected as round 1 candidates 1 month later. February next year, first SHA-3 conference in KU Leuven. July 2009, 14 candidates were selected as round 2 candidates. 2010 was a second SHA-3 conference. December 2010, 5 out of 14 were selected as SHA round 3 candidates. And March 2012 was the third SHA-3 conference. Actually, in May 2012, the final winner is announced. And the final winner is actually Keccak. This is a list of candidates in first rounds. You can see lots of them are broken in the sense of collision or second preimage found, either in practice or in theoretic model. And in the second round, there were 14 candidates left, and none of them are broken. There are several design strategies. There are few ARX designs. ARX means designs using only addition, rotation, and XOR. And there are also AES-based designs. So AES is the standard of NIST for block cipher, okay? Advanced encryption standards. And there are also SBox based designs. SBox is the non-linear commutation, usually of size 4 to 8 bits, okay? Shaba is a design, a mixture of everything. SHA-53, so this by Duncan is on AES. SIMD is a mixture of everything. Skein, designed by Schneier, is AX design. So the selection criteria depends on what Nist is looking for. Of course, the first thing is security. If it's not secure, of course, it will not be selected. And if it's secure and yet software hardware efficient, then you will have more bonus points. So for software speeds, there's SHA-3 engine comparing the speeds of all the second round candidates. As you can see, the speeds actually varies from a few cycles per byte to something like 28 cycles per byte. So how do we measure the speeds? We compute a really long message, okay, like 1 megabytes or even 1 gigabytes, and measure how many cycles it took the CPU to execute the hash computation. And you do the ratio of number of cycles divided by the message length in bytes. Okay, that's what we call cycles per byte. And a smaller number means it's faster, okay, because it takes lesser cycles to produce 1 byte, to process 1 byte, yeah? So you can see the fastest is actually break, producing digest in roughly 8 cycles per byte. And, okay, so the scale, when you have a lower scale, it means lower slope, it means it's faster. So Hamsi and BMW was one of the fastest designs, but both of them are broken. However, there's many problems with speed because we cannot purely depend on the speeds as the performance merits, because in many use cases, speeds is actually not the bottleneck. For instance, if you have a tag, okay, RFID tag, and you want to compute the digest, usually for RFID use cases, the digest length is actually small, like a few bytes or several tens of bytes, etc. Yeah, so the digest length is small, and the speeds to produce such digest doesn't really depend on the hash function. It depends on the transmission rates. Yeah, that's the bottleneck. So speed of a hash function is not always critical, and we are not agreed on the method to measure it, the way to measure it. So many hash functions perform much better when the message length is larger, because usually you have an initial setup, means that it takes several computations before you actually process the message block. And this also depends on the CPU type, whether you have multiple cores, whether you can do parallel computation, whether it supports hyper-threading frequency, and it also depends on operating systems and implementations, as well as compiler. And there are several special registers like SSE2 and SSE3, SSE4, and the AES new instructions. Yeah, so there are many affecting. For AES new instruction, is really helpful because before the AES new instruction, AES runs in more than 10 cycles per byte. With the help of AES new instruction, it can be run in parallel. So if you have 4 or more cores on a CPU, it can be as fast as 1 cycle per byte. Okay, so there's a huge difference, 10 times difference. Okay, so designs making use of AES as the underlying primitive are fast with the AES new instruction. So you can see 4 cores, 4 threads, you can run AES in roughly 1 cycles per byte. If you have even more threads, you you can be even faster. Yeah. And support on mobile and embedded system is also a selection criteria. For these devices, the resources provided is very limited. So it requires the implementation taking up very few resources, like the amount of registers in software or the area taken in hardware implementations. And there are several hardware implementations comparisons as well. So you can see the smaller squares represent smaller area. So you can see cube hash, which is an ARX design, is really small. And Ketchak is very small as well because it's a RX design. There's no addition actually. So addition takes lots of area. It doesn't have addition, so it's very small. And depending on the internal state size, compared with the digest size, we have several divisions. Like nanopipe design means the digest size is same as the internal state size. So nanopipe designs, Marco Demgard designs are also nanopipe designs. White pipe means the internal state size is bigger than the hash digest, and you also get sponge or sponge-like designs. Sponge is actually also white pipe design because the digest size is actually smaller than half of the internal states. So during the SHA-3 competition, there are several attacks invented actually, because lots of people joined this field during the SHA-3 competition, so it becomes very hot topic at that time. Many new attack techniques were invented, like a rebound attack, truncated differential linearization, message modification. That's the message modification was the method to attack SHA-1 and SHA-2, SHA-1 and MD5. Edge break attacks like cube attack, cube test attack, zero-sum distinguisher, rotational distinguisher, and for rebound attack, it actually first appeared in FSC 2009. Same as start from the middle rebound, and then move forward to super SBox rebound, non-full active super SBox rebound, and rebound rotational distinguisher, and etc. So basically, how it works is if you start with the difference here, in one round, it will propagate to the full states difference. Similarly, if you start with a 1 byte difference here, you will propagate to the full state difference here. There's a property of AES SBox, okay, or any SBox in general. So, given an inputs and outputs difference, on average, you can find one solution. Yeah? On average, you can find one solution. So same here. You have a full states difference and full states difference here. You can treat the round 3, the entire round, as a huge SBox. So given this difference and this difference there, you can actually find one solution on average, fulfilling this inputs and output difference pair. So with that one solution, you can propagate backward and forward to find the fulfilling path of this differential path. And this is the general results found by rebound attack at that time, up to the 2010, 2011. Okay. So there was a new design called Lane in the first round of the SHA-3 competition, fully broken by the rebound attack in time due to the AD. AES could be distinguished for up to 8 rounds out of 10. Grosto was the final round candidate. There's a distinguisher for the full version. And Echo is the round 2 candidates. So there's a full round distinguisher for 8 out of 8 rounds. JH can be distinguished, but up to 16 out of 35.5 rounds. Yeah. Of course, there's no no single criteria to evaluate the usefulness or the effectiveness of the attacks. So there are distinguishers for the permutation, like Echo, Grosto, and Keccak. But how useful are the permutation distinguisher? So permutation distinguisher means there's a way to distinguish this permutation from the random permutations. Usually it's difficult to convert these distinguishers to the attacks of the hash function. And how do we evaluate free start collision? So free start collision means collision attack of the compression function, okay? Compression function. And these attacks may or may not be converted to the collision attacks against the hash function itself. Yeah? Because in the attack of the compression function, you assume everything is under control, including the input training value and the message. However, in the full hash function, the chaining value can only be modified through messages. So there's a one lesser degree of freedom in the attack setting. So collision attacks against compression function is actually easier as attacker than the collision of hash function. And collision of wide pipe designs, free start collisions of wide pipe and nano pipe designs, there's a big difference as well. Because on the wide pipe designs, you get a much larger internal state, which means you get a much larger degree of freedom as an attacker. So it's much easier than the nano pipe design compression functions to attack. However, it will become much more difficult to convert wide pipe design compression collisions to hash collisions. So whether we should care about proofs? Of course, all the proof relies on some assumptions, like the underlying permutation of the Keccak is ideal, then it is proven that the hash function is secure as well. However, we know it's impossible for us to really practical ideal permutation in practice, because once everything is, there's no randomness. Once there's randomness, how can you tell something is ideal or not? So in theory, if we can have ideal permutation, then we have a secure hash function. However, in practice, it's never possible to have ideal permutation. So this reduction proof have some value, meaning that the construction itself has no structural issues, but in practice, the underlying assumption can never be fulfilled. Okay, the SHA-3 final list are 5 candidates. This was announced in 2010. It was Break, Grosto. Break is designed by a researcher from Switzerland. Grosto by Denmark and Austria. JH from Singapore. Kechak from Belgium, Skane from USA. And the final winner was Kechak. This was announced in 2012. So that's about the SHA-3 competition. So SHA-3 actually care about security more than efficiency because of the crisis happens to MD and SHA family. But after SHA-3, what shall we do? We focus a bit more on lightweight hash functions. On lightweight hash function, we mean when it is implemented in software and hardware, it takes lesser resources. We might compromise some security strengths, like we offer a little bit lesser security strengths. However, it can be used in very small devices, like RFID tags. So the work started mainly early 2000s. The first lightweight block cipher was called Present. It was proposed in CHES 2008. And it can be converted into a hash function by some hashing modes. Quark is a dedicated lightweight hash function proposed in 2010. And if you compare the security level and area, you can see Quark has some instances offering only 64 bits collision resistance and 128 bits preimage resistance. The area is really small, like 1400 GE. So gates equivalence, one gates equivalent is the area of a NAND gate in hardware, in ASIC. So that's the units. So this means it takes roughly 1400 times of the area taken by a NAND gate in ASIC implementation. And for some more secure Quark, faster implementations, of course, it takes some more areas to implement. But this one is really small, really small. Yeah. And Photon is yet another dedicated design. One of the co-designer. This was published in Crypto 2011. It has many variants from output digest 80 to 256. So for 80, we only provide collision resistance up to 40 bits. Okay, but in some use cases where collision resistance doesn't matter, we provide this variant provides 80 bits preimage resistance. That's quite sufficient for many use cases. And the area it takes is very small, 865 GE. So that's half of the U Quark. So if you want a bit more security, you can choose larger variants like 128 or 160. Of course, then you will come with a bit more implementation costs. Okay, thanks for your attention. So, you have any question?